The Texas Lottery is a government monopoly that puts government in the business of gambling. This is not a role for government, and it's time to end it. Federal antitrust legislation should follow Texas' lead, as the Lone Star State has built an economy that thrives on competition and opportunity by prioritizing free market principles, limited government intervention, and policies that empower businesses rather than constrain them. Hello. Welcome to this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Remember, you can find the show notes to my podcast at vanceginn.substack.com. You can also go to my website, vanceginn.com, find out everything you need there, including my YouTube link and podcast on the Apple Podcasts and everything else. So go and check those out as well. I've got a lot of key things that I want to talk about today, diving deeper into Econ 101 and what that really means and what we need as a North Star moving forward. So with all that, let's go ahead and jump right into it, all right? The freedom movement is growing. In the days since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, many have stepped forward to advance traditional values and free market ideals. There is much to elevate in this renewed movement, but it must remain anchored in the pro-growth principles that have fueled free market victories throughout American history. Free markets have long resisted government spending and control, yet today, too many conservatives on the free market side support tariffs, industrial policy, and special favors for select businesses. These are forms of economic socialism, not free market capitalism. This is central planning that shifts power from the people to the politicians. What we need instead is a principled, practical defense of free markets and the courage to press leaders to embrace it, even when it's politically inconvenient. That's why I put together a list of basic economic principles that you'll find in the show notes page. And so in this episode, join me as we talk about Econ 101 and prepare whether or not markets really are the answer for the future. I think there's a lot of good stuff that's going into all this. And so we've really got to make sure that we understand what's happening and make sure that we're on the right footing for the future. So lesson number 1, proper roles of government and markets. The best system for solving problems isn't government committee or politicians, it's people in the marketplace. Innovation happens when individuals make choices and share information through prices. Prices tell us what works and what doesn't, guiding resources to their most valuable use. Government power, by contrast, tends to reduce liberty. Every regulation, subsidy, or tax is a restriction on what people can do with their lives. As Ronald Reagan put it, the most terrifying words in the English language are, quote, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Well, when you look at stores restocking thousands of products daily, not because of government planning, but because of market signals. Contrast that with Soviet bread lines or gas lines during price controls in the 1970s, where central planning left shelves empty. You all can also remember it during the shutdowns of what that did to the amount of planning that was going on in the economy, and people are going out for toilet paper rolls and everything else to stock up. The U.S. shale revolution was driven by private innovation, unlocking massive new supplies of oil and gas, lowering prices, and making American energy more secure. People aren't widgets in a spreadsheet. They have hopes, beliefs, and talents. Trusting them to make their own decisions based on the real circumstances of their lives yields better outcomes than relying on distant experts who try to make those decisions for them. Lesson 2 today, externalities, monopolies, and monopsonies. Quick lesson here, if markets usually solve problems better than government, what about monopolies or other downsides? A monopoly occurs when a single firm dominates a market, often due to government-granted privileges, control of key resources, or economies of scope or scale. A monopsony is the flip side, where there's only one dominant buyer, typically the government. An externality is a spillover effect. So how do we handle these cases? Well, governments sometimes regulate monopolies, break them up with antitrust laws, or even take them over. However, each of these options comes with significant trade-offs. And often, the best choice is to do nothing and let the market adjust or remove government action that created the situation in the first place. For externalities, private solutions are often the most effective. When you look at the Cozian theorems and all those things, that's really what we should be looking at. When they don't, government may try corrective tools like light touch regulations, which can protect the environment at a lower cost than heavy-handed regulation and distorted Pigouvian taxes like carbon taxes or gas taxes. Real-world examples of this is that look at the U.S. Postal Service is an example of a government acting as a monopoly, albeit one that is weakening due to competition, by assuming public ownership of delivery of mail. Government schools have a monopsony in the teaching market as they dominate demand for teachers, although this is weakening with increasing education freedom across the country. Pollution is a negative externality because it harms innocent third parties from the exchanges that are happening in the private marketplace. Technology spillovers are positive externalities because others benefit from them without directly incurring the costs. Why does all this matter? Well, so-called market failures like asymmetric information, monopolies, or externalities are often the result of government interference, not free markets. Attempts to fix them usually expand government power and worsen the problem. While some point to tools like carbon taxes, these rely on flawed models and ignore Hayek's knowledge problem. The real solution is not more intervention, but a government that sticks to its proper role, upholding contracts, protecting people, and providing limited public goods. Prosperity arises from strong property rights, open markets, and people allowed to cooperate freely. Lesson number 3, government failure. Well, one-size-fits-all systems like those of the U.S. government created in healthcare and education quickly become costly debacles. They serve special interests, but leave ordinary people behind. And government spending doesn't grow the economy. It only redistributes resources that already exist from taxpayers, hardworking taxpayers. Whenever the government tries to solve problems that markets handle better, the result is usually, if not always, worse. The result is worse, okay? As Milton Friedman explained, one common explanation of why government is the problem, and one that I have often stressed, is the influence of special interest. Government actions often provide substantial benefit to a few while imposing small costs on many. He also pointed out why problematic programs never seem to go away. The general rule is that government undertakes an activity that seems desirable at the time. Once the activity begins, whether it proves desirable or not, with good outcomes or not, people in both the government and the private sector acquire a vested interest in it. If the initial reason for undertaking the activity disappears, they have a strong incentive to find another justification for its continued existence. Think about this. Printing money and sending out checks don't stimulate the economy. It just fuels malinvestments and likely inflation if the debt is monetized by the Fed, making goods more expensive and harder to get. Central planning has left the United States economy with a $37 trillion national debt, a bloated $6.6 trillion Federal Reserve balance sheet, and growing doubts about the American dream. All this matters because America didn't become the most prosperous nation in history through central planning. What made the American model unique was simple but powerful: protecting private property, making free enterprise rewarding, encouraging personal responsibility, and respecting people's right to voluntarily transact. That's the foundation for real prosperity, folks, not government expansion. Number 4, let's apply these principles where markets should have control, right? From Medicaid to Medicare and private insurance to the ACA, the American healthcare system today serves bureaucrats, insurers, and politicians, not the people receiving care. Government schools, or public schools, some call it, are a monopoly. We have one major provider of education across the country in each one of these localities, but the quality is not improved, as test scores show student academic performance decreasing across the country. Families and students deserve better, which is one reason why I'm in favor of universal school choice through education savings accounts. What about externalities and monopolies? Well, Washington's SCORE Act would create a federal NIL, name and image likeness, regime that hands the NCAA new antitrust protections and entrenches the cartel that kept players suppressed for decades. The Charter-Cox merger is a quiet test of whether Washington will keep its promise to let markets work under a Trump administration, a chance to prove America is back to doing business on merit, not politics. What about in Texas, where I live? The Texas lottery is a government monopoly that puts government in the business of gambling. This is not a role for government, and it's time to end it. Federal antitrust legislation should follow Texas' lead, as the Lone Star State has built an economy that thrives on competition and opportunity by prioritizing free market principles, limited government intervention, and policies that empower businesses rather than constrain them, though this has been slipping in recent years in the Lone Star State. So look, at the end of the day, market failures are usually the product of government intervention, not free markets. And every attempt to fix them with more intervention only grows government and deepens the problem. Real prosperity comes when we recognize government is often the problem and instead build institutions that protect property rights and keep markets open so people are free to enter, exit, and thrive. These are the things that help keep us together and allow for free market capitalism to work so well in our republic in America, and I hope that other countries would too. Free market capitalism has also been the best way to bring people out, billions of people, out of extreme poverty of living less than $1 a day, and really even more than that, okay? And it's also the best way to let people prosper. So when we think about voluntary exchanges, we think about how people behave. We really need to consider what are the trade-offs, what's underlying all these different things. And the more the government gets in the way with, antitrust policy, carbon taxes, this, that, and another, it distorts the well-functioning market prices that are a process to get to that point. So let's trust people and markets over people in bureaucracy or even politicians. So I hope if you're a legislator or a lawmaker listening to this, or you've been shared to it by your friends or family, understand that you're in a good position in order to make positive things happen, but don't put things in the wrong direction. Too often what I see is that people get in these positions and they start with good principles and they move off of that. What I'm hoping to provide is more of a North Star of where we should be heading for the future. And I think that is with more liberty and more free market capitalism, okay? Thank you for joining me again today. Remember, you can find us again at vanceginn.com. Find all my show notes and subscribe to my Substack newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com. Be a paid subscriber. That would also help me put these videos together and so much more that I do across the spectrum. So thank you for joining me. God bless you. And until next time, let people prosper.